you're going to fully make it. That's what will give you the fortitude to find light in the darkest hours. When terrorists believed they could bring you down, bend your will, break your resolve. But they never did, and they never will. Instead, we saw incredible stories of heroism and courage, Israelis taking care of one another, neighbors forming watch groups to protect their kibbutz, opening their homes to shelter survivors, retired soldiers running into danger once again, civilian medics flying across rescue missions, and off-duty medics at the music festival caring for the wounded before becoming a victim himself. Volunteers retrieving bodies of the dead so families could bury their loved ones in accordance with Jewish tradition. Reservists leaving behind their families, their honeymoons, their studies abroad without hesitation, and so much more. The State of Israel was born to be a safe place for the Jewish people of the world. That's why I was born. I've long said, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to invent it. While it may not feel that way today, Israel must again be a safe place for the Jewish people. And I promise you, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure there will be. 75 years ago, just 11 minutes after its founding, President Harry S. Truman and the United States of America became the first nation to recognize Israel. We've stood by your side ever since. We're going to stand by your side now. My administration was in close touch with your leadership from the first moments of this attack. We're going to make sure we have what you need to protect your people, to defend your nation. For decades, we've ensured Israel's qualitative military edge. And later this week, I'm going to ask the United States Congress for an unprecedented support package for Israel's defense. We're going to keep Iron Dome fully supplied so it can continue standing sentinel over Israeli skies, saving Israeli lives. We've moved U.S. military assets to the region, including positioning the USS Ford Carrier Strike Group in the Eastern Mediterranean, with the USS Eisenhower on the way to defer further aggression against Israel and to prevent this conflict from spreading. The world will know that Israel is stronger than ever. And my message to any state or any other hostile actor thinking about attacking Israel remains the same as it was a week ago. Don't. Since this terrorist attack took place, we've seen it described as Israel's 9/11. But for a nation the size of Israel, it was like 15 9/11s. The scale may be different, but I'm sure those horrors have tapped into some kind of primal feeling in Israel, just like it did and felt in the United States. Shock, pain, rage, an all-consuming rage. I understand, and many Americans understand. You can't look at what has happened here to your mothers, your fathers, your grandparents, sons, daughters, children, even babies, and not scream out for justice. Justice must be done. But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes. I'm the first U.S. president to visit Israel in time of war. I've made wartime decisions. I know the choices are never clear or easy for the leadership. There's always cost, but it requires being deliberate. It requires asking very hard questions. It requires clarity about the objectives and an honest assessment about whether the path you're on will achieve those objectives. The vast majority of Palestinians are not Hamas. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas uses innocent families in Gaza as human shields, putting their command centers, their weapons, their communications tunnels in residential areas. Palestinian people are suffering greatly as well. We mourn the loss of innocent Palestinian lives like the entire world I was outraged and saddened by the enormous loss of life yesterday in the hospital in Gaza. Based on the information we've seen to date, it appears the result of an errant rocket fired by a terrorist group in Gaza. The United States unequivocally stands for the protection of civilian life during conflict, and I truly grieve for the families who were killed or wounded by this tragedy. The people of Gaza need food, water, medicine, shelter. Today, I asked the Israeli cabinet, who I met with for some time this morning, to agree to the delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza, based on the understanding that there will be inspections and that the aid should go to civilians, not to Hamas. Israel agreed the humanitarian assistance can begin to move from Egypt to Gaza. Let me be clear, if Hamas diverts or steals the assistance, they will have demonstrated once again that they have no concern for the welfare of the Palestinian people. And it will end. As a practical matter, it will stop the international community from being able to provide this aid. We're working in close cooperation with the government of Egypt, the United Nations, and its agencies like the World Food Program and other partners in the region to get trucks moving across the border as soon as possible. Separately, I ask Israel that the global community demand that the International Red Cross be able to visit hostages. I just demanded that the United States fully supports. Today, I'm also announcing $100 million in new U.S. funding for humanitarian assistance in both Gaza and the West Bank. This money will support more than 1 million displaced and conflict-affected Palestinians, including emergency needs in Gaza. You are a Jewish state. You are a Jewish state, but you're also a democracy. And like the United States, you don't live by the rules of terrorists. You live by the rule of law. And when conflicts flare, you live by the law of wars. What sets us apart from the terrorists is we believe in the fundamental dignity of every human life. Israeli, Palestinian, Arab, Jew, Muslim, Christian, everyone. You can't give up what makes you who you are. If you give that up, then the terrorists win, and we can never let them win. You know, Israel's a miracle, a triumph of faith and resolve and resilience over impossible pain and loss. Think about October 7th, the Jewish holiday, where you read about the death of Moses, a tragic story of a profound loss to an entire nation, a death that could have left hopelessness in the hearts of the entire nation. But though Moses died, his memory, his message, his lessons have lived on for generations of the Jewish people as well as many others. And just as the memory of your loved ones will live on as well. After reading the story of Moses' death, those who observe the holiday began reading the Torah from the very beginning. The story of creation reminds us of two things. First, that when we get knocked down, we get back up again, and we begin anew. And second, when we're faced with tragedy and loss, we must go back to the beginning and remember who we are. We are all human beings, created in the image of God with dignity, humanity, and purpose. In the darkness, to be the light unto the world is what we're about. You inspire hope and light for so many around the world. That's what the terrorists seek to destroy. That's what they seek to destroy. Because they live in darkness, but not you, not Israel. Nations of conscience like the United States and Israel are not measured solely by the example or power, and we're measured by the power of our example. That's why, as hard as it is, we must keep pursuing peace, must keep pursuing a path so that Israel and the Palestinian people can both live safely, in security, in dignity, and in peace. For me, that means a two-state solution. We must keep working for Israel's greater integration with its neighbors. These attacks have only strengthened my commitment and determination and my will to get that done. I'm here to tell you the terrorists will not win. Freedom will win. So let me end where I began. Israel, you're not alone. The United States stands with you. I've told the story before, and I'll tell it again, of my first meeting with an Israeli prime minister 50 years ago as a young senator. I was sitting across from Golda Meir at her desk in her office, and she had a guy who later became prime minister, sitting next to me, just before the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And she flipped the maps up and down, telling me how bad things were and how terrible they were. All of a sudden, she looked at me and she said, "Would you like a photograph?" I looked at her. She got up from her desk and walked out into that hallway. I think it's marble flooring. Walked out in the hallway. We walked out and there were a bunch of photographers standing in front of us. We were standing shoulder to shoulder. Without her looking at me, she said to me, knowing I'd hear her, "Why do you look so worried, Senator Biden?" And I said, "Worried? Like, of course I'm worried." And she looked at me and she didn't look. She said, "Don't worry, Senator. We Israelis have a secret weapon. We have nowhere else to go." Well, today, I say to all of Israel, the United States isn't going anywhere either. We're going to stand with you. We'll walk beside you in those dark days. And we'll walk beside you in the good days to come. And they will come. As you say in Hebrew, which I'm not going to attempt to do because I'm such a terrible linguist, I'll say it in English. The people of Israel live. The people of Israel live. Israel will be safe, secure, Jewish, and democratic state today, tomorrow, and forever. May God protect all those who work for peace. God save those who are still in harm's way. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, what is your red line that would prompt U.S. military involvement in this war?
Mr. President, your team said you have...
President Biden in Israel making remarks, obviously, on the world stage, not taking questions there in the room, certainly likely because of the magnitude of the situation that he's now trying to confront also as the President of the United States. He said, "I come to Israel with a simple message. You are not alone." Went back to that message at the end of his speech there, spoke of the 31 American citizens who are among the dead as well. To the families of the hostages, he said, "You are not alone." And he also went on to talk about how he will ask Congress in the coming days for money, for aid to help defend Israel, to help keep the Iron Dome fortified and to continue to protect Israel from incoming attack. He also said the vast majority of Palestinians are not Hamas. He talked about the Palestinian civilians suffering. He spoke of what we saw at the hospital in the last 24 hours, saying, given the intelligence that's been shared with him by his own defense team right now, that he believes this was an errant rocket fired by Hamas. Regardless, we know that the images have inflamed the world. We've seen the protests throughout the region. He talked about $100 million in humanitarian aid for Gaza and the West Bank. A lot of news being made by the president just moments ago. I want to bring in our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, again. Martha, first on this point of aid for military, for protection, for defense of Israel. He will ask Congress in the coming days. He also delivered this message, Martha, not directly to Israel, but it can be inferred that that's who he was talking to. You actually reported here on our air in the past days that this would be the message he would deliver. Don't be consumed by rage. He talked about the U.S. saying we have made mistakes before, in particular after 9/11, and he reminded the world that Israel is a democracy and must act in accordance to rules of law, not the rules of the terrorists, and obviously they don't have any.
Exactly. It was a somber and steadfast speech, David, and the message he gave was very clear and very tough. And the White House had said that President Biden would be asking tough questions of Netanyahu and reminding him of the United States' own experience after 9/11 and the fallout from that. We were a country that everyone sided with and felt so bad for, and then went into Iraq, and that tide turned. He does not want to see that happen here. He wants Israel to keep in mind what's happened in the past and learned from those past lessons as they, as planned, go into Gaza, and to certainly think about civilian casualties, to certainly think about the Arab and Muslim world as well, and grinding home that message that all Palestinians do not support Hamas. And that aid package to the West Bank and Gaza will mean a lot to the people there, and Joe Biden really hammered that message home, David.
Martha, my thanks to you. I want to bring in Ian Pannell again. And Ian, you heard the president there say that he has asked the Israeli cabinet to open up some sort of route, obviously through Egypt, to try to get aid to civilians inside Gaza, and saying if there's any evidence that Hamas tries to steal that aid as it's coming in, there would be action taken. But he did say that the Israeli cabinet heard that message from the president, and that this will be an effort as well that we see in the coming days.
Yeah, that's right. A message of support, solidarity, but also of moderation. And moderation not just in terms of appealing to Israel not to feel the anger, but not to be consumed by it. Also a message that aid package that was going to be delivered to the people of Gaza and the West Bank, handing out some kind of olive leaf saying that there will be some kind of humanitarian corridor. I mean, we know that Secretary of State Blinken has been trying to work on this as well. I think it's an important message. That very, very rare cancellation by the King of Jordan of the meeting with President Biden. President Biden's about to go down that road any minute now. He was about to fly to Jordan and meet with the leaders of Jordan, of Egypt, and of the Palestinian Authority. They pulled out of this meeting. It was a real snub for President Biden, and also the attempt to try and bring along wider regional support. I just want to pick up on one other thing. President Biden made it very clear that he said that clearly not all the Palestinian people are Hamas. But the longer conflicts go on, the more radicalized people become. And we actually saw protests today in the West Bank where people were calling out in support of Hamas. Hamas does not rule the West Bank. And it just shows the dangers, which the U.S. is acutely aware of a spread in this conflict, but also of radicalization. David?
Very good point, Ian Pannell, also in the region for us. Ian, thank you. One last question to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. Mary, you heard the president say he will ask Congress for help, for money, for aid for the defense of Israel. He also spoke of the $100 million in humanitarian aid for Gaza and the West Bank. And as Ian just pointed out, the second part of this trip, and it was crucial, meeting with leaders of the Arab world, was canceled given the images that came out of that hospital in the last 24 hours. But the president and this White House thought it was very important to keep this trip moving forward. He went to Israel anyway.
And David, there is no question this is the most difficult and sensitive diplomatic mission of this presidency so far. You just saw the president trying to balance this impossible tightrope of showing unwavering support for Israel, grieving with Israel, while also trying to tamp down rising tension, trying to address this humanitarian crisis and prevent this from becoming a wider war. You have mentioned this, but it stands out and it bears repeating, that caution that he had for Israel. While he is vowing that Israel will once again be a safe place for Jewish people, the president, with that blunt message, don't be consumed by your rage. Don't make the same mistakes that the U.S. did after 9/11. Be deliberate, he said. Have clarity about your objectives. And while he did, again, speak to the Palestinian people, noting that Hamas doesn't represent them and calling for Israel and Egypt and others to allow aid to finally flow into Gaza, what you didn't hear, David, was any assurances that he may have gotten from Netanyahu, or any assurances that he is hoping to get from Egypt, that this aid will finally be able to flow. And that is part of the reason, David, that this is such a diplomatic high wire for this president.
Mary Bruce live at the White House for us. Mary Bruce, Martha Raddatz, Ian Pannell, and all of our teams and crews, photographers across the region, we thank you. We'll continue to report this story out. The entire team will be back for World News Tonight a little later today. We return you now to regular programming. I'm David Muir in New York. For many of you, it's back to Good Morning America in the West. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
No. Live from ABC 7, this is Eyewitness News at 7.